Hi, I'm Alicia Butler-Pierre. Thank you for visiting my YouTube channel. The episode that you're about to listen to is a pre-recording of my podcast, The Business Infrastructure Curing Back Office Blues show. If you hear some topics that are of interest to you, you can learn more about them by reading my book, Behind the Facade, and I'll tell you more about that after the end of this episode.
Necessity is the mother of invention. Have you ever heard that expression before? Well, if you haven't, you're going to learn more about it today as I share with you where business infrastructure is needed and how it ties to balancing supply and demand for your products and services. Hi there, and welcome back to the Business Infrastructure Curing Back Office Blues show. I'm your hostess, Alicia Butler-Pierre. And last week, I explained when business infrastructure is needed, and specifically the symptoms of unmanageable fast growth. So if you missed that, be sure to check out episode number 4. Today, I'm going to focus on where business infrastructure is needed. And quite simply, it's wherever there is more demand than you can supply. And you find that you have to create value by linking things together to create more value and a more efficient customer experience. Let me explain what I mean by that. As you know, business infrastructure is all about linking your company's goals with the people, processes, and tools necessary to support those goals in a profitable, scalable, and sustainable manner. Now, do you remember when I told you about the Oprah effect? It describes a situation when you have to scale your operations and you have to do so really quickly because you have this large influx of business as a result usually of being on some type of a TV show, a radio show, an advertisement that you may have done, and before you know it, things have taken off and you have customers just coming to your website, coming into the doors of your business, and it might be more than you can handle. Now stay with me as I describe to you how this is really what the law of supply and demand is about. In its most basic rudimentary definition, the law of supply and demand just basically states that whenever there is an increase in price, it's going to cause a decrease in demand, but an increase in supply. I'll repeat that. An increase in price causes a decrease in demand and an increase in your supply. Here's how it works. As word starts to spread about how good your product or service is, the quantity demanded for your product or service increases. But you may not have the resources in the form of people, capital, certain technologies that are required to meet that supply or meet the surge in that demand. So when demand is greater than what your business can handle, a resource shortage occurs. Now, one quick solution to alleviate that resource shortage is to actually raise the price of your product or service. Now, this might temporarily stifle the demand and gives you more time to do things like hire more staff, get some processes in place, secure a larger office space, or even upgrade equipment to be able to increase your speed and capacity. Another solution is to automate the processes that you have or that you use to make your product and deliver your service. Now, raising the price of your good or service would hopefully get you to a point where your ability to supply your customers' demand meets in the middle, or it balances each other out. If and when you reach that point, that's actually known as a point of equilibrium. And it represents the price of, the point of equilibrium is the price that represents the intersection where your customers are willing to buy and you can provide that product or service without any resource constraint. And this, honestly, is what we all strive for. We want to have a perfect balance between what our customers demand of us and our ability to be able to supply or meet that demand. But I have to warn you, your supply constraints may only be temporarily lifted during a price hike. In fact, if you raise the price of your products or services too high, you can actually lose customers who may never come back. When you have that kind of a situation where you have more resources to supply than what your customers are actually demanding, that's known as a surplus. And in that situation, you'll either have to offer more value at the new price, the new higher price that you're charging, or you'll have to scale back on your resources. Now, that was a very brief, basic, broad, rudimentary, generic definition of how the law of supply and demand works. But I wanted to do that to set the stage in sharing this story that I'm about to tell you about how the law of supply and demand shaped what we today know as our transportation infrastructure. So here's the story of building the first subway in America. As we all know, there has always been a high demand for cities, as evidenced by the population densities that you see around the world. So whether we're talking about Mexico City, Moscow, or Mumbai, there are certain population centers around the world where there's just a very high demand because of the resources, because of the geography, the opportunities that are there. There are a number of reasons. At one point, Boston was the most congested city in America. And I want to read to you an excerpt from a documentary called The Race Underground. In the late 1800s, Boston reigned as America's most crowded city, with nearly 400,000 people packed into a downtown of less than 1 square mile. With more than 8,000 horses pulling the trolleys, the city was filthy and noisy, reeking of manure and packed with humanity. Oh my gosh, can you imagine? Now, to make matters worse, the owners of these different trolley systems or streetcars, they all had their separate routes. They charged different fares. It wasn't one company. There were, I think, 13 to 17 different streetcar companies just in Boston alone. So with all of these horses, all of these people, and then you have these trolley systems that were owned by different companies, the entire transportation system was just a mess. There was no infrastructure. And that's why when the first subway in the world opened in London, England in 1863, Frank Sprague couldn't wait to see it for himself. Though he was impressed by what he saw in London, he noticed the pollution because London's system was a coal-powered steam engine. So it wasn't what we see today when we get onto subway trains. This was powered by coal. And so it released all kinds of black soot into the air, polluting the environment. It was just a really messy situation and actually very toxic and harmful to the health of the passengers and passers-by. So Frank Sprague started thinking of ways that he could improve upon this. He went back to America and he started working for Thomas Edison, the famous inventor. But he knew that anything he invented would not have his name on it. It would actually have Edison's name on it. So eventually he resigned from Edison's company and he went about securing a patent for his self-regulated electric motor. Now here's what made his electric motor different and unique from any other electric motor at the time. His motor would allow a streetcar to carry different loads or weight while maintaining its speed. So the necessity for less congested streets in Boston literally led to Frank Sprague's invention of the self-regulated electric motor. Now, as with so many of us, when we're starting our businesses, we have this great idea that we think can meet the demand of customers, but we may not have the capital or the cash to bring our ideas to fruition. So Frank Sprague really struggled initially to find an investor who would provide the capital he needed to be able to test his motor. Eventually, he was asked to do a pilot in Richmond, Virginia. And after a few rounds of trial and error, he got the trolley system to work on his new electric motor, and he invited a man named Henry Whitney, who at the time was a real estate mogul from Boston, to come down to Richmond, Virginia to witness this new streetcar that could be powered by electricity and not coal. And he did something for the very first time. He actually took 22 different streetcars or trolleys. He lined them up, linked them together, powered them up to the electrical lines above, and it worked. And Henry Whitney was so impressed by what he saw that he went back to Boston to get the lawmakers to allow them to build electrically powered streetcars, and to not only have these electrically powered streetcars, but to also have them run underground. Now, by this point, Henry Whitney had already successfully gotten legal approval to consolidate the different streetcar companies into one. So that alone solved a huge efficiency or lack of efficiency problem that existed in the transportation structure at that time. The fact that you had all of these different companies, there was no rhyme or reason. There was competition, but this was one point in history where people were actually looking for a monopoly, if you will. So Henry Whitney was able to consolidate all of these different companies into one, but there was still a major problem. People were scared to death at the thought of going underground. Can you imagine? If you've ever been on a subway system, or if you happen to live in a city now and the subway is just a part of your day-to-day commute, it's just a part of your life, you can't imagine not commuting via subway. It can be hard probably to kind of wrap your mind around it, but people were literally very scared, and they thought that this was going underground was very unnatural. It was ungodly. It was getting you closer to what they described as the nether world, closer to the devil. And there was also this very real fear of electricity. Electricity was still a very new technology at this time, and it was considered to be very dangerous. Because remember, if you have electrical lines hanging above the street level, these lines back in this time were known for falling a lot, and sometimes people would accidentally step on a live wire and actually become electrocuted. So most people in Boston wanted nothing to do with this. You know, the thought of using electricity plus going underground was just way too much for them. And not only that, but you also had business owners who were vehemently opposed to digging up underground in front of their places of business, in front of their storefronts, because they argued this would reduce foot traffic, it would significantly impact or adversely impact their businesses because people would not be able to walk in front of their stores and be able to patronize their businesses. So there was a lot of resistance all the way around to building this first subway. But eventually, lawmakers agreed to go on a demonstration ride in Boston, very short tract of land that they rode on this electric car. And once they went on that demo ride, they too were very impressed. And they actually allowed the citizens of Boston to go ahead and officially vote as to whether or not to proceed forward with the building of this new subway system. And by a narrow margin, the vote was approved to build America's first subway system. And this happened on September 1st, 1896. The very first subway in America opened in the city of Boston. Now check this out. As much as people resisted, on the very first day of the subway being opened, 250,000 people rode on it. And within its first year of operation, more than 50 million passengers had taken a ride on that subway system. So this new subway alleviated congestion on the street. The air was clean. It expanded the transportation grid. And in effect, it started to help lay the foundation for an infrastructure that linked with other transportation modes at that time, which was just shipping and regular trains. And we have to keep in mind, airplanes and automobiles weren't even invented yet. Now, going back to the quote that I started off with, necessity is the mother of invention. Frank Sprague saw a need to relieve congestion on the streets of Boston. He knew that his solution needed to be clean and it needed to be safe. And although there was no original demand for a subway per se, through his persistence and his collaboration with private money and lawmakers, the first subway using electric motors was built. I want you to think about your business. Is there something that you can invent or innovate to meet the demands of your customers and make sure that you have the business infrastructure to replicate it? I don't know about you, but I found this story of this race to build the first subway system in America to be absolutely fascinating. And if you want to learn more about it, because I definitely gave a Cliff Notes, very summarized version of the story, there is a documentary by PBS called The Race Underground. You can actually go to their website, I believe, which is pbs.org, and look for that documentary. You can also find it on YouTube. And there's a book by the same name, and the author's name is Doug Most. And the name of the book, obviously, is The Race Underground. Now, one expert in this documentary described Boston in the late 1800s as, quote-unquote, choking on its own progress. Don't allow your business to choke on its own progress. Sometimes things are moving so fast and all of the cylinders are in gear and you're just go, 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 go. And before you know it, similar to what happened in Boston, you have a mess. There's congestion, there's no rhyme or reason to anything, there are no processes, there's loads of inefficiency, things are ineffective, unproductive. Don't choke on your own progress. This is where business infrastructure is needed. When you're looking at the demand for whatever it is that you offer to your customers, and if it's just causing all of this business to start coming your way, you have to take a look at your infrastructure and figure out how you can link the right people, the right tools, and the right processes to your goal of being able to satisfy your customers and provide them value, and to create an experience that your customers will love, that will make them want to keep doing business with you over and over and over again. That's what it's all about, right? Now, if you want to learn more about the law of supply and demand, just Google it, look for any reputable economics source. And also, if you do Google it, make sure you look specifically for images so that you can kind of get this visual, graphical representation of what the law of supply and demand looks like. And just kind of play around with it with your own company and see what price point you may need to charge where the supply curve and the demand curve in that graphical representation actually intersect. I think you'll find it to be a really interesting exercise. You can also go to my website at www.eqbsystems.com/blog and search for Law of Supply and Demand. I've actually written a very detailed article about the law of supply and demand and how it specifically relates to small businesses. At this point, you know what business infrastructure is, why it's needed, who needs it, when, and where. All that's missing is how. Stay tuned for next week when I will share exactly that, how you can implement business infrastructure, whether you're looking to open new locations, franchise, or even sell your business. In the meantime, if you're ready to start implementing business infrastructure in your own company, check out this free report that I've prepared just for you at processforcashflow.com. There you'll be able to download a free report called How to Use Business Processes to Increase Cash Flow. Again, that's available to you for free at processforcashflow.com. There you'll be able to get a sneak peek into how processes are used in creating business infrastructure for fast-growing small businesses. Did you learn something today? I sure hope so. And if you think it's something that your colleagues can benefit from, then by all means, don't keep this to yourself. Be sure you download and like this episode. Comment to give your feedback. Let me know how I'm doing. Let me know if there's certain topics that you'd like to see me cover in the future. And just overall, share this information with your colleagues. We have to look out for each other because, as we all know, entrepreneurship is not easy. And as always, you can connect with me on LinkedIn or Twitter. Just search for me under my name, Alicia Butler Pierre. And remember, stay focused, be encouraged. This entrepreneurial journey is a marathon and not a sprint. Until the next time.
Thank you for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed what you heard. If so, be sure to like the video and be sure to subscribe so that you'll be the first to know when our next episode airs. And remember, if there are topics that you want to learn more about, you can do that by reading my book, Behind the Facade. I'll see you next time.